We are back with another video, but this time it ain't One Piece, it ain't Dragon Ball, it ain't even Digimon, it is Lorcana. And we got the one and only Hrvoje topping in the basically regionals, but more like S in Lorcana. And he made top 16 with the deck he's gonna introduce. But without further ado, Hrvoje, tell us a bit about your deck.
Hey, nice to be on the channel again. Thanks for having me. So yeah, I played the Disney Lorcana Challenge in Birmingham, which is, well, it would be like an equivalent to a regional in One Piece, but regional in other card games usually a small event. This was a big event. It had 2,048 players. So it's like the biggest events they have outside of the Continentals. And yeah, I got top 16. And I figured before I do the deck profile, I might explain a little bit of how I got into Lorcana, because One Piece is still my main game. Like if anybody's out there thinking, oh, is he switching games? No, I still much prefer One Piece. But how I approach competitive gaming is, if there's like a strong locals or players locally who are willing to put in the grind and test, then I will hop in, because why not? Like if you play with good people, you get better yourself. And like 2 months ago, some of the Yu-Gi-Oh players who are really good realized, wait, there's no events in Europe to play for Yu-Gi-Oh. Let's just try another game. And they started testing Lorcana. I was like, okay, I'll hop in. And then we tested for like 4 or 5 days, like very often, just gathered up every day, played a bunch of games with, we just printed out a bunch of decks. Like, just to show you an example, this is all proxies, which we print out in Yu-Gi-Oh size. This is like smaller than the Lorcana cards. And we just played games. And we actually established that the deck that we ended up playing at this event was the one we're probably just going to like the most, very strong. And this was back in set 4 format. And then One Piece Liverpool finals were coming up, and we just started testing for that instead. And one of those players placed very well in the Liverpool finals. He got 33rd, very unluckily on tiebreakers. But yeah, once those were over, we went back to testing Lorcana. We ordered the cards for the deck because we didn't have any physical cards, and they arrived on Wednesday before the tournament. And yeah, then we built these decks and actually tested on Thursday and Friday a bit more, just to make sure we're satisfied with the deck. And yeah, the tournament day came, and the other two friends I went with, Luca Forian and Rudy Horvat, they did not perform as well, but they get just as much credit in building this deck as I do, because Luca especially tested this deck the most when we were playtesting. And yeah, this was like a big event. It was hosted in UK, which when I usually go there, I don't do very well. It's like cursed land for me. And given what happened in top 16, it might still be. But yeah, it has a very weird format. So it's like best of two, 9 rounds of Swiss, no matter the number of players.
How does best of
Which
this stuff?
Oh yeah, so you roll dice, and the winner gets to choose who goes first game one, and then the other person automatically goes first in the other game. So like there's no choosing after you lose. It's like you pick to go first game one, and then your opponent goes first game two. And going first is very favored in this game. It's I think in terms of balancing kind of iffy, but yeah, the format is definitely different. Took a bit of adaptation too, but I think it still kind of works as a competitive format. I'm not the biggest fan of it. But that's how it is played, and obviously there are people who perform very consistently in Lorcana and top every event, like Din Kang Pham and I think the Lido brothers in US. So obviously, if you put in the work, you can compete. And the game is, I think, especially coming from games like Yu-Gi-Oh, One Piece, Flesh and Blood, I think it's like very simple to learn. And that's not a slight against the game. That's just basically how Ravensburger and Disney marketed the game. It's like anyone can pick this up and start playing. And the upside is you just get into the game very easily. The downside is there are some scenarios in tournaments when you're trying to play competitive where somebody beats you with like the most thoughtless strategy ever. They just aggro you down in 4 turns, and you're like, oh, I guess that happened. And that was actually my first impression of tournament play, round one, game two. After I win game one, my opponent just has the insane high roll and just kills me. Like you build from 0 to 20 lore, which is effectively health, right? So I got burned for the entire health bar in 4 turns. I was like, oh my god, this game is awful. In the game three, my opponent does the thing where he just summons a big guy on turn two, because in this game you can cheat out big guys if you play them on the card of the same name. Kind of like in One Piece you would have small ETG play big ETG, right?
Yeah.
You have that with like a bunch of characters in Lorcana.
Basically,
And both
other,
games you just had that.
sorry,
Sorry?
just interrupt. For other people that also play Dragon Ball, basically like evolve with another that's called shift. Yeah. Just before we get to deck profile, because a lot of people also don't know about Lorcana, just a quick explanation of the cards that are displayed. I mean, the price card. Lorcana don't have a leader.
Yep.
Not every game has a leader. Then you don't have mana or don't have Dawn, dance, magic. You use your card, mana, your energy. In this case, ink. On the top left, there are symbols account the play cost. If they have those kind of symbols, they can be used as ink at the start of your upkeep turn, whatever. And if you have other cards that don't have the symbol, they cannot be used ink. But this is, I guess, like kind of a balancing act. Because otherwise, kind of like One Piece. Some cards have counter. Some don't have counter.
It's kind of like counters, exactly. So yeah, the game works if it's like in Dragon Ball. You can take a card from your hand and put it down into your mana / ink / energy, whatever you want to call it. But some cards cannot do that as part of their balancing, and you can do that once per turn. And these cards and this playmat are the prizes for placing in the tournament. This is top 128, top 64, top 32, and top 16 is the playmat. And top 8 is the Serial Mickey, which I barely missed out on because I made a misplay that my opponent will laugh about for the rest of his life, probably. But yeah, the deck I played was yellow-green. Amber Emerald, I think, is how they name the colors in Lorcana, and it's kind of one of those decks where you have a lot of cheap, smaller pieces that combined work really well. Like the whole is stronger than the sum of its parts. Like it's like a Zuki type of deck is what I mean. Like you have cheap stuff and then you combine it into powerful stuff. First card in the deck is like the small Diablo. He's just a 1-cost that's sinkable, has very irrelevant stats, and he says when he's played, you look at your opponent's hand, and that's like not the most insane effect, but it's still very useful to just know exactly what your opponent is working with from the very start of the game. But the main reason you play him is, of course, for the big Diablo, who is probably the most broken card in the game. You can shift him on the small one by discarding one of your action cards, which are like events or spell cards.
For free?
And by shifts, sorry?
Does he shift for free or does he shift?
So you discard a spell card, event card, whatever, and yeah, you just shift him on top. Like you don't have to pay mana for it.
So you can do
and when he's rested, so when you play him and when you rest him, whenever your opponent draws a card during their turn, you also draw a card. And this also includes their draw step. So like when you have this and they draw for turn, you also draw for turn. And if they play a draw spell, you draw cards as well. So he's like just insanely broken. And to top it off, he has evasive, which is like flying if you've played Magic, or elusives if you have played Legends of Frontera. Basically, only characters with evasive can challenge him in combat, and not many characters in the game have that. And then there's Sir Hiss. He's just a 2-cost evasive with a good stat line. He's 3/1, so he can just hit stuff. But the main thing is he's evasive, so a mechanic this deck really likes to abuse that exists in Lorcana is singing, which allows you to play your spells, your events, or they called action songs, by tapping the characters with the same or higher cost as the song you want to play. So this deck runs a lot of 2-cost songs, so you just tap him to play them for free. And since he's evasive, your opponent is going to have difficulty getting rid of him. So he acts kind of like a very unassuming centerpiece of the strategy a lot of the time, because when you have Diablo, who is also a very good singer, because once again, evasives are difficult to remove from the board, this guy picks up the slack, and you use him to play out all your broken spells. And then there's 4 Ursula. She's just a piece of disruption. She looks at the opponent's hand and discards a song card. So spells are divided into actions which cannot be sung by characters, and songs which you can tap characters to sing them. And she just weakens the opponent's way of singing. She's kind of worse than his because she has very little power. So this is like attacking power, defensive power. But she still gets the job done. Like in some matchups, she's very important, like Steel Song and Red Blue. And yeah, I guess I didn't talk about that much, but when we started testing, it was the set 4 meta, and then set 5 came out, and not a lot has changed in the meta. Red Blue and Steel Song and Red Purple are still like the main big decks. And this deck, we didn't actually add a single set 5 card to it after all the testing. So yeah.
Sometimes
But the point is, yeah,
happens.
there's eight. And the reason there's only 4 of these 1 costs is 1 costs actually suck in this deck, because as you get into later stages of the game, you top deck cards, you want them to be useful, and 1 costs are very rarely useful. Whereas these 2 costs, they can still like be used to sing songs, and they have some other like useful effects along the way. And then another broken card in the deck.
Quick question before those cards have all 1 law, right? If you tap them.
Yeah, they're all 1 lore.
Okay.
So the way this deck plays is, maybe we should explain that before getting into the entire deck list, but the overarching strategy is at some point you try to discard your opponent's hand entirely because you run a lot of discard spells, and around turn 4 or 5 you want to get rid of their entire hand and then deal with their board. And you don't really care how much they quest, how much they like burn you, because once you get rid of their hand, it's the same as in One Piece. Like, you know all of their options. Like, you have all the chances to play around stuff, and they don't, because they're not getting cards into hand except their top decks, and playing off the top deck is really difficult in every game.
Yeah.
So the idea is to discard their hand as soon as possible, and then deal with the board with one of the many ways I'll get to later. So you don't really care to get a lot of lore early on. You just sit on 0 for. You basically sit on 0 until you deal with everything your opponent has, and then you win. And your opponent, the number they reached while you were sitting on 0 is basically the number they stay at.
So kind of like Rebecca, like you don't be aggressive, you control the board, you control the resources of your opponent, and then once they are starved of resources, you just start questing with your board, and then you win.
Yeah, pretty much. Actually, that's a really good comparison. The other card that's really broken in the deck is Spinning John. He says, first of all, he has Ward, which is like hexproof in Magic. He cannot be targeted with cards or effects. So if you just leave him standing, he cannot be attacked, because he cannot attack active characters, with a few exceptions in this game. Like, for example, this one can attack active characters. But the idea is you just play him out, and his main effect is when your opponent discards a card, you draw a card, and you force them to discard cards. So he is basically a secondary draw engine in the deck, and you have these 2 3 costs, because you can also just play this guy as a 3 cost, right? You can play him down and then next turn quest with him to have him rested or sing. And you have core of these 3 costs, which draw a lot of cards, and you use them to get resource advantage and to have all the options that you take away from the opponent. And yeah, he also quests for 2, but you basically never quest with him until you have full control of the game, or you're trying to rush the game to a quick end because your opponent top deck insane and you need to salvage the game.
Before we get into like one of the best singers, I quickly want to mention also for the audience, since Lorcana is like a multi-language game, they allow to have more languages in one deck. So I mean, the main language, I think everybody's like English, but they also allow cards in German. I think there are French cards too. I'm not sure if there's Italian cards, like unlike in Banda games where you can only play in English, at least for now. Because I've been noticing German cards. Well. But yeah, I continue with
Yeah, the reason there's so many German cards is, as I said, we were ordering cards like 2 weeks before the event, and I live in Croatia, so we were like, we need these to arrive in like
quick
1 week most. So we just ordered from Austria and Germany, and most of those sellers obviously have German cards. And
fair.
Yeah. Then we have Ariel. She's a 3 cost with like solid stats 2/3. And when she's played, she looks at top 4 cards of the deck and adds a song. So basically a classic searcher. But for some reason, she also has the line where she's singer 5, which means when you want to sing a song, she counts as cost 5. So she can sing more expensive songs than her actual cost. And honestly, singing as a mechanic is, I think, very broken and imbalanced. And one of the like main balancing problems in the future of Lorcana, but you know, it is what it is. This card is really good. It's one of the few cards in the deck that are actually worth some money. It's like Diablo is like 30 euros, Ariel is like 5 or 6 euros, and there is, I think, Kida, who is like 15 euros or something like that, and everything else is basically nothing.
So it's pretty cheap to get Lorcana.
Yeah, actually the deck itself was, I think, if we didn't like order everything to arrive as soon as possible, we could have gotten a deck for under 250 euros, like everything.
Well, competitive,
but we kind of rushed it, so
that's pretty
yeah,
good.
like this entire deck, yeah, it's like better than most card games. It's not as good as One Piece, or like I guess it depends on the meta of One Piece, but to have a deck this strong be relatively cheap is, I think, pretty good. Then there's another piece of the green engine. These are the muses. They also have ward, so once again, you put them active, you don't touch them, and you use their effect. And their effect is when you play a song, be it through just playing it or singing it over a character, you can return a two power or less character to the owner's hand. So the main way you abuse this is obviously you return your opponent's stuff to hand, and stifle their board advantage, and you basically slow them down enough so that you can discard their hand and then kill their board. But also there are game states where you don't see like the two broken cards, the Diablo and Prince John. So you're just playing music control, and that usually means you're playing Ariel, you're singing something, and you return Ariel to hand, and then you play her again next turn for the search over and over again. And it gets into, you can also do tour slot to discard spells from opponent's hand. It gets into some very interesting dynamics, and I think this card is one of the reasons that the deck has as many options as it does. Like you can really play super flexible with some of these cards on the deck, and that's part of the reason why we loved it so much. Like there's a lot of skill expression compared to most other decks in the game, and just some really powerful cards when combined with others. For example, one of them is Kida. Kida says, so she's a 5-cost, and she's 3/5 power defense. And when she's played, she reduces the power of every character on the board by 3, like both yours and your opponent's. And this kind of aligns with the idea that the deck doesn't really want to do combat, so you don't care that you reduce the power of your own stuff. But if you play her after Muses and then start singing, you can return basically anything on your opponent's board to their hand, because most stuff doesn't have more than 5 power in the game. It's just how balancing of it works. And then she's a 5-cost and she can sing 5-cost songs.
Yeah, but I'm seeing
later request for 2.
She's also a shift target. She could shift, but you don't run any shift targets for her.
Yeah, so there's 1-cost Kida. She's 1-cost 2/2. And you could play her to shift this into this, but there's like 2 issues with that idea. First is, as I said, 1-cost kind of suck. Like when you top deck 1-cost later in the game, it's really bad. And then Kida doesn't even have the useful effect that Diablo has, where you look at your opponent's hand. She's just a 2/2 vanilla.
Okay, then
The
it's
other
not
is,
worth.
yeah, and the other is this is shift 3. And the deck already has 12 3-drops, which are all really good. So you kind of don't want to, you don't need more plays that cost 3
Okay.
to enable in the deck. So yeah, just the 3 copies worked very well, and you pretty much always see this stuff when you need it once your engine is going. And if your engine isn't going, you don't really need this anyways. But we'll get to that later. We fixed a lot of the consistency issues the deck had by changing out some of the cards that I think people stubbornly hold on to in green yellow. The last unit is a 5-cost Kriki. He says everything on your board gets +3 power for the turn, and he also quests for 3. So he's like, if you want to deal with the opponent's board in the old-fashioned way, you just have a lot of these small guys. You play this guy, everything gets +3, and you just slam into their board. And basically, it doesn't matter how negative you trade the board. Usually, you can trade it positive just because you get to choose how the attacks go. But once you get rid of their hand, if you get rid of their board as well, the game is pretty much over.
Yeah.
And he's also really strong because he lets you close out the games very fast. Questing for 3 is like 1/7 of the total HP. So yeah, that's it for the units in the deck. What's the count? 34? I think it's 34. Next up are the spells, which are like, I think, fairly standardized across the decks of green yellow. But we, as I said, made some changes which work to actually make the deck a lot more consistent than the average version. So first of all, bare necessities. This is like Ursula, but a song, and it has a wider reach. You look at our opponent's hand and discard anything that is not a character, which is really powerful because there's...
Wait, what?
Ursula only discards... Sorry?
You discard anything that is not a character.
Yeah, so a location or any action, be it song or
So this is also pretty good not in the mirror, because we still have like 34 characters, but like let's say the board is established and they find an action that they couldn't play, and you just play this guy, or not play, you sing it most likely, and then you just discard locations events, not events, songs, actions. Isn't that
I
broke?
mean, yeah, it's really good
too?
into all those decks that play a lot of non-character cards, including the mirror. Like if you see this in mirror, you're generally happy because you get rid of their bare necessities, their sudden chills, uh, all the other cards I'll get to later. But also, obviously, it's really good into top decks of the format, into Steel Song and Red Blue.
Yeah.
Then Sudden Chill is like the mild version of this. It's just your opponent discards one card. They choose the card, but it's very unconditional. Doesn't matter what the card is, they have to discard one. And once you have Prince John established, you don't really care that they're choosing. You're getting a free card
I mean, if
filtered,
you
and they're losing a card.
if you keep the hand low, like because you said this deck is about hand destruction most of the time and just outvaluing. If they just draw, like if they only have one card and you just play this card, then all of a sudden they have nothing.
Yep.
And you say draw for that.
It's all about closing down the opponent's options. And then there's 4 copies of You Have Forgotten Me, which is it's the only non-song action in the deck, so you cannot sing this. It costs 4 and says your opponent chooses 2 cards and they discard them. And once again, this is like a very much a blowout. It's actually a card so strong that I usually keep it in the mulligan. Like if I see it, you want to see at least 1 copy per game, most games, because at some point you want to like close down the opponent's options completely. And once they're on 3 cards in hand, you can sing this over some character and cast this, and they're on 0 in hand, and now you can start dealing with the board and turning the game around, no matter how aggressively they started. So this is just a really powerful card. And once again, if you have John, if you play John 3, this and 4, they discard 2 cards, you draw 2 cards. It's like
I think if
fantastic
this
trade.
card would be singable, he's also inkable. That would be a big mistake. Like knowing that I printed Ariel in like set 1 and I print this, nah. I think that would Ariel would be too.
I think it's already an insanely broken card in this deck. And then we have 3 copies of We Don't Talk About Bruno, which we did consider bumping up to 4 at some point in testing, but like with 3, it's still common enough. It says when your opponent bounce one of your opponent's characters and they then discard a random card. It doesn't have a cost restriction, so you can return anything to hand. And the card itself does cost 5, but it's a song, so you can sing with the Ariel and all the 5 costs. And the main way to utilize this is as spot removal, because once you empty your opponent's hand, if you whatever they have on board, if you Bruno it, it's getting discarded. And since it's doing it in 2 steps, where it goes to their hand and then is discarded, if you have Prince John, you draw a card. So it acts like as like the 3 more copies of this card spelled in some situations. And then the big song, Under the Sea. This is like the big play of the deck, is resolving Under the Sea, usually with Kida, where you play Kida and then you sing Under the Sea with the rest of your board.
Oh yeah.
And Under the Sea says send everything that's 2 cost or 2 power or less on your opponent's board to the bottom of the deck. So if you play these 2 together, you sing their entire board like Atlantis style.
This reminds me, isn't that one of the new keywords that because singing, like you can sing normally and then you sing together as like you just combine the total amount.
Yeah, okay. So it does have the sing together, which is like instead of just singing it with one character, you can sing it with a combination of characters that have the total cost needed, which is like even more broken in terms of how you sing stuff. I'm not sure if it's new because I have been playing for only like
I think
2 months
it
on
came,
and off. So
if my memory serves me right, I think it came set. I think the keyword sing together, or in German it's gemeinsam singen, came set 3. Actually, I'm not sure because set 3 came locations. Off top. Let's continue. We are.
Yeah, and then the last songs in the deck are a bunch of 2 costs, which most people don't play, but we actually found them to be really useful because, first of all, the 2-drop slot in most games was kind of underutilized because even if you saw Sir Hiss or Ursula, finding a use for them was kind of difficult because Sir Hiss was like his main thing would be countering Sisu Flynn against Red Purple or just opponent's Diablo in the mirror. And he didn't really have good stuff to sing if your opponent did the classic thing where they just ink as much of their hand as possible, play as much of their hand as possible, and bring themselves to 0 cards themselves. And now you still have a bunch of dead sudden chills or bare necessities in hand, which you could play to like sing them for Muse's effect or something, but it's very inefficient. So we have these cards, which are Strike a Good Match and Be Our Guest. They're both songs. Strike a Good Match says draw 2 cards, discard 1. So it's like a filtering card that helps fix consistency. And Be Our Guest is look at top 4 cards of your deck and add any character to your hand. These being songs that you can play like proactively without losing card advantage made them very important because, especially in games without John and Diablo, where you were playing music control, you would have some 2-cost on the board. You almost always have a Hiss or an Ursula. Suddenly you have songs which you can sing and then get Muse's effect to bounce opponent's board or Recycle or Ariel or whatever works. And also, since these cards are digging into your deck, they're helping you find the good cards. They're helping you find Prince John, they're helping you find Diablo, they're helping you find Ariel. But also, with the Strike a Good Match, the discard, it helps you fix those kind of bricky hands, which they happen very rarely because this deck has only 11 uninkable cards, which is very low for a standard Lorcana deck. I think the average is like 16 to 20. But if you do get stuck on too many of these uninkables, Strike a Good Match does fix that in a pinch by just discarding the extras. Especially happens with Under the Sea extra copies. And then the last card is 2 copies of Hidden. What's the English word? Hidden Cove.
Yeah.
Which is the location. So locations, the way they work, you can think of them like stages, but you can have multiple. In Lorcana, you pay a cost for them, which is for this one is 1. And then to move a character there, you also pay the cost that it says here. And this card says everything that's in this location gets +1 power, +1 defense. So you basically use this to move your stuff out of removal range, which is very important in some matchups. For example, against any red deck or even steel deck, you put Diablo in here, and now he's 3/3. Red cannot brawl it. They cannot use Big Sisu to destroy it. And Steelsong cannot just kill it with Storm Rage, let the Storm Rage on, or grab your swords. So it's just a very strong card, and the fact that it's a 1-cost is very deceptive because I don't think of it as a 1-drop card, because usually it just costs like 1 plus the number of characters you want to move here. So it's very flexible in that you can play small Diablo turn 1, then turn 2 you play this, shift the small Diablo, and move it here, which costs you 2 mana. Or 2 ink rather. And there's a lot of those plays where you just move Diablo here, you move Ariel here, you move Muses here, and you just make sure your stuff is immune to most common removal options. And yeah, just end up being super powerful. MVP again in many games against red decks. And yeah, I guess that's it for what was included in the deck. I can go a bit about which cards we excluded from the deck and why, because I guess some of the inclusions are not super standardized. I'll try to be quick about it.
I mean, if you have the cards there.
Yeah. So first is like set 5 came out, and for those who follow Lorcana, they'll notice there's 0 set 5 cards in this deck. The only one that came out that we really seriously tested was You're Welcome, which is like Maui's song. It says you can target basically anything on the board, put it or shuffle it into the opponent's deck, and then owner of that card draws 2 cards. And honestly, like this card, when I read it, I was like, this is so awful. Like, why is this good? But everybody kept hyping it up, and I could not understand why. So we tested it, and then testing it still sucked, and it kept sucking. So we just we could not find a justification to include this card.
I mean, I can see it in the terms of, since it removes anything. I mean, you don't want to remove like an item. I'm not sure if blue still play. I mean, blue's like the region, or Sapphire, I think it's called. It's the region of the items, whatever. But they don't have like high cost items. I mean, you can sing it, which is good. But I mean, against red, and against purple, I think they have high big setted units.
The only unit that we really thought, this would be worth removing with You're Welcome is the big Ursula. And that's the problem. Like, whenever we thought of stuff that we might want to remove with You're Welcome, it was usually units, and at that point you just you assume that you have emptied their hand, and then we don't talk about Bruno, it's just better.
Yeah, okay.
Because it just gets rid of it completely, and they don't get 2 cards to their hand. Like, some people advocate for this because it combos with this. Like, you do this, they draw 2 cards, and you give them 2 cards to discard. But that kind of defeats the like, you're effectively making this a proactive play, whereas you can just do Strike a Good Match or something instead, and still get a good proactive play going, and then possibly find a better song to work with to deal with their board, or just a character.
But what about, okay, but what about because if I remember correctly, if characters are on location and location is banished or like destroyed, what happens to the characters on the location? do they also get destroyed, or do they just move
no.
out?
So it really depends on the location itself. Usually they just stay on the board. There is an exception, like if you have this. So the way health works in Lorcana is your characters gather damage counters. So say this gets hit by it's here, so it has 3 power, 5 defense, and it combats something that has 4 power. It gets 4 damage counters, but it survives because it has 5 health. But if this location is killed later, because it has health, you can attack into locations. This still has 4 damage counters, and it will die. But if it had no damage counters and this was killed, it would just survive. It would be like.
Then yeah, you're welcome. It's not as good as you could think, because giving them draw like 2 cards.
Yeah, I mean, there's also the argument that you could just use it on some of your own stuff and then draw 2 cards, but it's so expensive to do it. And once again, Strike a Good Match exists and does the same thing where you just draw 2 cards to filter. Because when you bottom your own thing, you're investing this from hand and 1 card from the board. And Strike a Good Match is just, draw 2, discard 1, you end up on the same number of cards total. So yeah, this card just, we couldn't find the justification to play it, even though it was so hyped. Yeah, I just never cut it. And then there's a card that a lot of people run in the deck, which is Painting the Roses Red, which is 2 cost Hong. You give 2 of your opponent's characters -1 power and then draw a card. And the idea behind this is that it synergizes with Muses, because you can reduce some of their 3 powers to 2, and then Muses returns it to hand, which is like a budget version of doing the heat up play where you just reduce everything, bounce. And you can also do it with Under the Sea, obviously. And it draws a card, so it like filters itself, right? But this is the first card we cut when we started including Strike a Good Match, because this card digs deeper, it finds more options, and same issue for Be Our Guest. And we wanted to be able to use these cards proactively and find the cards that we actually need to win the game, because cycling 1 card is not really that impactful. You want to find the key pieces. Yeah, that's why that wasn't played. And then there's also Lucifer, which is a 5-drop, uninkable. That's the big thing. Uninkable 5-drop that says when he's played, your opponent discards 1 action card or 2 of any cards. So it like has that same type of strong synergy as You Have Forgotten Me, but it's much less flexible. It's not inkable. The body itself, the unit is not as strong as Kida or Kriki. So it was just like never really made it far into testing. And then there's some other cards which I don't have physical copies of because we didn't order stuff we didn't need. But the 3-cost Ursula is like the one I think I was asked about the most. She says when she sings a song, she sings the song again. And then you put it on the bottom of your deck, which is like gives you a free double cast, which has some nice synergies with like Strike a Good Match, because it gives you an extra card, right? And this because it gives you a second search, so you go +1 on the activation. But the thing is, for a lot of those cards, the answer as to why they are not in the deck is you already have all these good 3-drops. Like the 3-drop slot is overloaded, and a card that's marginally useful but doesn't really cut it with these in the deck. We couldn't justify it. Like maybe you can play one because it's inkable, but it's not really going to be the main thing that you're focusing your game plan around. It's mainly going to be Prince John on 3, maybe Ariel if you want to go for an early Under the Sea. Because how the deck plays, you just want to discard your opponent's hand. You don't really need to double cast everything, and the best way to do that and then later be able to deal with your opponent's board is to just establish a bunch of stuff that you keep active, or it's elusive so you can rest it, and then you sing Under the Sea. But if you have such an Ursula that like really wants to sing because she double sings, if you sing with her early, you are just exposing your character to getting killed, because I think she has the same stat line as Ariel, 2/3, and once she sings, most meta decks can easily kill her because she's rested. So yeah, we just wanted to make sure that as we build up our board, we get to the point where we discard our hand, and then we have everything ready to just sing Under the Sea and finish the game. Usually it would be, I mean, there were even games where it was like some very weak setup for singing Under the Sea, but it was still enough. Like I played Diablo on 1, have nothing on 2, play John on 3, and all the time I'm not touching any of these. Then 4 play Muses, and then on 5 do Kida Under the Sea, and yeah, it's just very flexible. It's kind of even difficult to explain how the deck is supposed to play. But generally, you play very passive early game. You let them do their questing and whatnot. Get to like 14, 15, who cares? And then you just clear everything.
Right.
It probably works much better in action than I can explain in words. But yeah, the deck performed really well. I feel it has really good matchups into every other meta deck.
One question though.
Yeah.
Since those are really low stated units, and not everybody has what, like, I mean, what like can only be challenged. Don't really swing with them or like press with them.
Yeah, you just keep them active.
How? I mean, okay, if they are active and they have ward, they are safe. But I think John doesn't have ward.
No, John has ward. John has ward. That's why he's so broken. Yeah.
Oh, never mind.
That's why he's so broken.
Nah, never mind. I was about to say, if John has ward, he's active, nothing can remove because
if you play this into this, you have two. Yeah.
Oh, they're both ward. Oh my lord. Okay, never mind. Then
so you can just build a board of ward, and there was a game I think in top 32. No, probably top 64, where I play Prince John on 3, play another Prince John on 4, and then I play You Have Forgotten Me. And what this does is he discards 2 cards from hand, and I draw 4 cards. Instant game over. Like,
what do you
because
do?
He's
okay. One question. What do you do against D decks that run a whole new world? That card not still in deck?
Like it's a really strong card, and you hope to discard it with Ursula or Bare Necessities before they can play it. Because once again, you're playing a disruptive deck, and especially if you see Diablo on 1, you have a you have a really good idea of what they're going to be doing in their following turns. So you can use Ursula to discard either Let the Storm Mage on or Strength of a Raging Fire to protect your Diablo, or if they have a whole new world and a way to like get to a 5-cost quick, you just discard that. And same idea with Bare Necessities. And yeah, basically the deck plays into every meta deck pretty much the same, where you just hope to establish Diablo or Trinjon as soon as possible, discard their stuff, and then just remove their board. Steelson can be difficult because they can play the very aggressive game with Piglets and Daisy Ducks and whatnot, and they can just shift into big guys that you cannot answer early on curve. But outside of Steelsong High Roll, I feel like the deck has no bad matchups. And my loss in top 16 was really just me being the most stupid player to ever touch the game.
What happened?
It's turn 3. Okay, so it's turn 3. I have a Diablo I shifted. And I have Ariel. And my opponent's playing red-purple. And he has the Cherna... I'm forgetting what the card is called. Do I have it here? No, I don't. It's the purple Chernabog Followers. It's the purple 2/1 that when it quests, it can banish itself to draw a card. It has 2 of those, 1 active, 1 rested. And I'm looking, that card is useless when Diablo is on board, because if he uses the draw effect, I will draw a card. And I'm looking at those cards and thinking, he's just going to be aggressively questing and not banishing them just to try and aggro me down. So yeah, I guess I can just kill 1, and he doesn't have a way to deal chip damage to Diablo, so I don't care if he takes 1 damage. So I attack with Diablo into the Chernabog, and I go to grab a dice to put 1 damage counter on it, and he's like, oh, so Diablo dies. And I look at the card and it says 2/1 and not 1/2, because I thought they were 1/2 like the Magic Broom or whatever the deck plays. And my Diablo dies turn 3. I'm like, oh my god, what did I do? It was like I like move to the side, like grab my bottle of water and just look at the floor for like 2 minutes. Or my friends told me it wasn't 2 minutes. That it was in my head that it was 2 minutes. I'm like, how do I play the game from here? I only have 2 cards in hand. I had to invest an event to discard and this Diablo to play the Diablo, and now he's not even going to be drawing the cards. My opponent will get to use his other Chernabog to draw a card, and I'm like, holy, what the hell did I just do? So we enter this really, really, really grindy game where I end up losing 18-20 in lore. And to be fair, at that point, like I was genuinely not feeling well, because after that horrific misplay, like I had like shivers, or what it's called, needles and pins or whatever, through, or maybe it's prickles, something like that, through like my entire hand and fingers. I was like losing senses. I was genuinely feeling awful. So I made a few small errors throughout the rest of the game, like minor stuff, like one of the turns where I established second Diablo, I rest him, and my opponent is on 0 cards, has some board, and he draws for turn, and then he plays his turn real fast, like just quests everything, plays be prepared, and I forgot to draw from Diablo. So I was like, oh man, I'm so stupid. And then I probably should have dealt with his locations as soon as they came down because I had a location of my own. But a lot of like smaller stuff that if I wasn't so devastated by tilt, I probably would have noticed and still won the game despite a massive throw on turn as early as turn 3. But yeah, it ended up being a very grindy game, and my opponent played very well in both games 2 and 3 to actually close them out. So props to him. I'm really sad I didn't get the serial Mickey because that's top 8 only. But yeah, aside from that, a very stupid, tragic mistake. It was a pretty fun tournament experience. I'll be playing Lorcana just because, as I said, it's a simple game, which means you can catch up to the meta quickly. Like you can learn the game and start playing and get compounded at it very quick. So as long as you have like good TCG basics, it doesn't hurt to try it out. It has really good pricing, so like.
All right.
I think that's why most people play it actually.
I mean, maybe I give, and probably most other people, if they went through all this time to watch. I mean, it was a long video. It was a really thoughtful video, and obviously for the people that don't usually play Lorcana, we explained a lot of the things. Do you have any other words you want? Shout outs. I mean, you gave your shout outs.
Oh yeah. Okay. So yeah, once again, Luka Foren and Rudy Horvat, we tested a bunch together and came up with this deck. Or obviously not the basic concept of the deck. We just refined the green yellow that was out there to what we thought was the best version of the deck. But also, yeah, if you're watching this and you play One Piece, Christian Chula and I have a Patreon called the Cloud Chasers, where we post a lot of our thoughts on the meta and guides for the meta leaders and do streams here and there in the Discord as well. So make sure to join that as well. You can join as free members and just enjoy the community. And yeah, I think that's it.
I thank you. I thank you a lot for your time. This was again a long video, but yeah, I hope the people from No Heroes also enjoy this kind of video. I mean, seeing one of the best players in One Piece in Europe also play Lorcana and just top there casually on a
I mean,
Saturday
the
night.
winner of the event was also a One Piece player, like Federico Mecozzi. He used to play Yu-Gi-Oh! And he has mainly played One Piece for the last year or so, and now he won DLC Birmingham as well. So
One Piece is strong.
And Rafael Sarmiento, who got top 4, also One Piece player. There's a lot of One Piece players who are, farming Lorcana.
One Piece players are everywhere. But with that said, thanks for watching, and I hope I see you next time. Peace out.
Thanks for having me. See ya.